Morning broke over the drylands like molten gold, light seeping through the porthole windows, casting thin shadows over Kalari's sleeping form. She stirred against Dax's chest, her breath warm over his skin, her body still aching from everything they had shared hours earlier, but in a way that felt new, not bruised or used, but stretched, opened, renewed. Dax was already awake, though he hadn't moved. He'd lain still so she wouldn't wake too soon. He liked the feel of her weight there, the slow thrum of her pulse syncing with his own. When her violet eyes fluttered open, he saw hesitation flicker in them for a moment, like she feared it had all been a dream. But when she saw him watching her with that same gentle steadiness, her lips softened, and her fingers curled slightly against his chest as if to ground herself in the truth. He asked how she felt. Her voice came out hoarse but calm, like a reed warmed by wind. She told him she felt real again. Not just alive, but present, in her own skin, in someone's world. Dax kissed her forehead and said good, because he wasn't planning to let her drift off into the void again. Not while he still drew breath. He fed her again more stew, this time with some sliced fruit on the side, small luxuries, but to her they were feasts. And after they ate, he showed her his ship, not just the cabin, but the engine room, the NAV console, the water recycling unit, all of it. He told her if she was going to be part of his life, she should know how it all worked. She followed him, asked questions, some he answered, some he made jokes about, and slowly he watched the light return to her. Step by step, Kalari was quiet by nature, but her mind was sharp. She learned fast, and when she laughed, really laughed, it made something in his chest ache in the best way, like watching the first green sprout crack through stone, fragile but unstoppable. Later that evening they lay together again, but this time it wasn't hunger that drew them. It was curiosity, affection, something deeper and slower. They kissed for long minutes, exploring each other without urgency. His hands roamed her body like a map, and she traced every scar he bore with reverence. She asked how he got them. He told her pieces of his past, merc jobs, border skirmishes, run-ins with pirates. He'd seen too much, but none of it had hardened him beyond hope. When she climbed over him, straddling his hips, he didn't guide her, didn't push, he just held her thighs, let her move at her own pace. And when she sank onto him, inch by trembling inch, it was as though the universe realigned around their breathing. Kalari moaned low and deep, eyes fluttering shut as her body accepted him fully, and Dax held her hips, steady, supportive, not claiming, but anchoring. As she moved, her rhythm built slowly, each motion deliberate, until their bodies were locked in a molten cadence of need and reverence. He whispered her name again and again, like a prayer, like he was afraid if he stopped, she'd vanish. She cried out when she reached her peak, high and sharp, and he followed moments later, his breath ragged in her ear. Afterward she collapsed against him, sweat cooling between them, his arms tight around her back. He whispered that she didn't have to prove anything, that she didn't owe him anything, that she was more than the hunger, more than what they tried to make her. And she cried again, not broken sobs but silent, relieved, like grief melting into something clean. They spent the next few days in that rhythm, repairing, relearning, becoming. She helped him in the engine room, surprised him with how deft her hands could be, delicate fingers adjusting coils and flux lines like she'd been born for it. He watched her shoulders straighten a little more each time he praised her, watched her eyes lift higher when she succeeded. And when they made love now, it was different, not desperation, not survival, but intimacy, playful, slow, sometimes frantic, but always mutual. Her body learned his and his hers, every touch mapping a language between them spoken without words. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the ridge, she sat beside him on the hull, legs curled beneath her, arms resting against his as they watched the stars. She asked what came next, and Dax turned to her, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he said that depended. Was she staying? Did she want this? Kalari stared out at the sky, her past behind her, her future unwritten, and then she said yes, yes to him. Yes to the possibility of being more than forgotten flesh. He smiled, just once, but it was enough. He kissed her temple, then asked if she'd help him take a job out on Tenera, some cargo run through the outer systems, dangerous but decent pay. She agreed, said she could pull her weight, and he laughed, told her she already had. Before they left the outpost she returned once more to the alley where she'd first stood, where they'd met. Nothing had changed there, the same flickering lights, the same vacant faces, but this time, she wasn't part of it. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was someone who'd been found, who'd been seen, and Dax stood beside her, silent but present, a witness to her reclamation. When they took off, Kalari stood beside him in the cockpit, eyes wide as the engines roared to life, hands gripping the railing as stars unfolded before them. He let her take the controls, taught her how to guide the ship gently, how to listen to the engine's song. When they reached orbit, she turned to him, grinning, and he kissed her, right there, in the open, like there was no shame in it, no reason to hide. Because there wasn't. They traveled from moon to moon, system to system. Kalari found herself smiling more, speaking more, learning every part of the ship and the man who owned it. He never once treated her like less, never once expected repayment in flesh. Instead he gave, and she gave back, and somewhere between asteroid belts and trade hubs, what they shared became love, not the kind born in fairy tales but real. The kind forged through pain, softened by laughter, sealed by trust. One night, weeks later, she woke from a nightmare, memories of cold and hunger clawing at her mind, but before she could scream, his arms were around her, his voice in her ear, "You're safe, you're with me, always." Those words settled into her chest like a vow, and she believed them, not just because he said them, but because he lived them. When he asked her, months later, if she'd stay for good, not just as crew, not just as a partner, but as something more, she didn't hesitate. She didn't need ceremony, didn't need titles. She just took his hand, placed it over her heart and said, "I'm yours," and he smiled and said, "Then I'm yours too," and that was it. They never returned to that outpost, never looked back, because the past no longer defined them, and Kalari, once a starving shadow, became something else entirely, a woman reborn, not in fire, but in love, in the warmth of one man's hands, the honesty of his eyes, the steadiness of his soul. And as their ship soared through the stars, together, they wrote a new story, not of survival, but of belonging. Of two lost things that found each other, and refused to let go. She hadn't eaten in days, her eyes hollow, her voice barely a whisper. On a crowded spaceport full of merchants, bounty hunters and cold-hearted travelers, she offered the only thing she had left, her body, for just a single meal. But no one even looked at her. No one cared, until he walked by, paused, and saw her. Not as an alien. Not as a beggar. But as a life worth saving. What he did next would start a chain reaction no one in the galaxy saw coming. She stood beneath the neon glow of the outpost's flickering sign, barefoot, ragged, her silver-gray skin drawn tight over her bones like parchment stretched over frame, eyes sunken but still glowing faintly violet in the dark. People passed her, pretended not to see her, their boots crunching over red dust as if she were no more than debris in the wind. She didn't even flinch anymore, not when a hovercart splashed grime near her feet, not when laughter rang from drunk miners leaving the cantina. She just stood there, arms at her sides, offering herself to anyone who'd look twice, offering her body in trade for food or even a mouthful of water. No one had taken her up on it, not here, not yet, not until the man came. He wasn't a local, you could tell by the way he looked at things, like they mattered. He didn't wear the same hollowed-out expression everyone else did. His clothes were dusty, yes, but the coat was real leather, not synth, and his boots looked like they'd seen more war than work. He spotted her from across the path, and unlike the rest, he didn't look away. His eyes didn't flinch from her desperation, instead they softened, as if recognizing something in her that hadn't entirely been lost. He didn't speak right away, just came closer, slow, like he was afraid she'd run. She didn't, she had nowhere to go. He stopped 2 feet from her and asked if she was hungry. She blinked, unsure if the voice was real or her mind playing tricks again, then nodded once, slowly, as if afraid to hope. He extended his hand, scarred, weathered, and she stared at it like it might vanish. When she finally touched it, her fingers trembled, skin against skin. She was cold, far colder than she should have been. He said his name was Dax and she tried to speak hers, but her throat was dry. He told her that was all right, she could tell him later. He led her into the cantina, past curious eyes, past the barkeep who looked ready to protest, until Dax gave him a look that shut him up quick. They sat in the back, dim light, peeling booth seats, and he ordered food, real food, not ration packs, and she stared at it like it was treasure. He watched her as she ate, slow at first, like she couldn't believe it was really hers, then faster, frantic, until he gently placed a hand on hers to slow her down. "You've got time," he said softly, "more than you think." She stopped then, looked at him, cheeks flushed from the heat of food and sudden emotion, tears welled up without permission. Her body shaking not from hunger now but from something deeper, older. Something long buried. When the food was gone he didn't rush her, he just waited. She finally whispered her name, Kalari, and he repeated it carefully, like it was sacred. She told him in halting pieces how she'd come from a world conquered, her kind deemed surplus after the mines dried up, too many mouths, not enough usefulness. She'd been loaded on a transport with hundreds of others, dropped on fringe worlds to fend or die. Most died. She survived barely, but no one here cared. They'd seen her type before. Seen what hunger could make someone offer. None had taken her, not out of mercy but disgust. She'd become invisible, less than a ghost, until him, Dax, listened, really listened, and when she finished he didn't speak platitudes or pity. He just said, "Come with me." She hesitated, but followed. He didn't live in the settlement proper. He had a small ship on the edge of the drylands, modest, patched but clean, warm. He let her shower first, told her the water was hers to use. She cried under the stream, not from pain, but the simple kindness of hot water. Afterward he gave her clothes, soft, clean, hers now. When she came out, skin pink from scrubbing, hair damp and combed back, he stared just a second too long, then looked away, apologized. She didn't mind. In truth she wanted to be seen, really seen, not as meat, not as pity, but as someone still alive. When she sat on the edge of the bunk he asked if she wanted to rest. She said no, not yet. So they talked about nothing, about stars, about what it felt like to be free. His voice soothed her, low and warm, until eventually she leaned toward him, drawn by something magnetic. Neither of them rushed. When their lips finally met it was slow, uncertain, but deep with something neither had words for. his hand cupped her jaw, fingers tracing the lines of her alien face like he was memorizing her texture. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into it, hungry, not just for food now, but for connection, for warmth, for the feeling of being wanted. When their bodies came together, it was tentative, almost reverent. He undressed her with care, not hunger, not greed, but reverence, as if unwrapping a relic long buried. Her body was scarred, faint lines along her ribs, marks of labor, of survival, but he didn't shy from them. Instead, he kissed each one, like he honored them. She touched him too, nervous fingers exploring the planes of his chest, his arms, his side. Every inch a contrast to her own. Where she was soft and pale gray, he was tan and weathered, flesh warmed by sun and grit. When he pulled her into his lap, she gasped, not in fear, but in surprise at the tenderness, the way he held her, not to dominate, but to hold, truly hold, as if anchoring her to something real. When they moved together, it wasn't frantic, it was slow, deliberate, a dance of rediscovery. She gasped his name, he whispered hers like a vow, and when she finally fell apart in his arms, shuddering with release, it felt like more than just climax. It felt like breaking a curse, like being reborn in heat and light. Afterward, he held her close, blankets pulled over their bodies, her head tucked into the crook of his shoulder. Neither spoke for a while. The silence was full, not empty. His fingers stroked lazy circles along her back, and she traced idle lines over his chest. She asked if he'd keep her, not like property, but like a partner. He said yes without hesitation, not because he pitied her, but because he saw her. Kalari, not a beggar, not a body, but a person. When sleep finally claimed her, curled against the only warmth she'd known in cycles, it was the first time in years her dreams didn't end in screaming, because for once, she wasn't offering herself for scraps, she was being held like someone who mattered.